Welcome to Peeragogy in Action 14. We're looking at collaborative learning environments today, and we're joined by Karl and Steve. I'll introduce them briefly. You can see them there up on screen. Charlotte is behind the scenes. Charlotte First is behind the scenes making this all happen. So Karl Hakkarainen has been an instructor at the Worcester Institute for Senior Education, which is otherwise known as WISE, for more than a decade, teaching courses on technology, history, law, and the social sciences. He retired from a long career in high tech and journalism, and his grandchildren still ask him for help with their tech gadgets. So I'll be very interested to learn about WISE. I hadn't ever heard of it before I met Karl. In fact, I hadn't heard of it before. Karl's been joining some of our conversations, but I didn't know the formal name of your organization until now. Our other guest is Steve Yost, who started and leads the Lexington Online Course Collective, or LexOC, a diverse group of people who agree upon and take online courses together, meeting weekly for discussions. LexOC have been active since early 2019. The evolving group has taken courses ranging from Shakespeare to molecular biology, and Steve offers help to propagate this cooperative learning model to others. He's a software engineer, musician, rower, and general omnivore of life. So there we go. These are our guests. I think with that clue about rower, I can get a guess about maybe about how Charlotte met you, Steve. Would either of you like to say a little bit about your experiences of the Peeragogy project as well? So this is also for anyone who happens to be joining at episode 14, can serve as a brief introduction to Peeragogy from some of the newer members of our community.
Sure. I can actually start because I think I was first in line to meet Charlotte of Karl and I. And the way that came about is after having worked through my Lexington Online Collective for a few years, I decided I wanted to be able to share this model since it was so successful with other people. So I put together this website called onlinecoursecollective.org. And then, the social platform Mastodon was just coming into popularity. I joined that, and I saw a post by Howard Rheingold about work that he had just done that just really lit up lit my light bulb. And so I contacted Howard. He told me you should talk to the Peeragogy people. And so immediately I was connected with Charlotte, and then it was a coincidence that she's also a rower, just extra icing on the cake.
Okay.
And it was through that I think, Karl, that I was acquainted with your work at WISE, and so you can take it from there.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Joe. Yes. In parallel, so Steve had reached out. We've been a member of an email discussion list for about 25 years, and our careers overlapped at a software company. We get to talking about our projects, and in parallel, I'd been looking at different ways of teaching. My focus is on teaching seniors. So the Peeragogy project seemed to have some very good models, and one of the contributors to version 3 of the manual, Brian Alexander, is a friend and someone I've known through his work for quite a few years. So it's been an engaging experience to try to understand how we organize these peer groups, and looking at the ways in which learning and retirement groups or lifelong learning organizations have been doing similar things. WISE has been in operation for 30 years, but programs such as Learning in Retirement started in the early 1960s. So these are familiar models that keep reinventing themselves from time to time.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that you've already hinted, both of you now collaboratively, about how and why the Peeragogy project exists. So it exists partly for exchanges like this one, and to be a place to bring some of those conversations which might be happening on other mailing lists. I'd be interested to know that mailing list some other folks might want to follow up there as well. So yeah, Charlotte, if you could flip us ahead. We got quick profile images of these folks. I'd never heard of Assumption Wise as well, but I'm guessing this is also a reference to the WISE project that we discussed before. Thanks so much for joining us. Usually we do 3 topics. Today we have 4 topics, exceptionally, so there's a lot to cover. We're just about 5 minutes in. So online course collectives, what are they? And maybe we go to Steve first. We could start a conversation. What are your top tips for starting your own online course collective?
Right. Yeah, so I'll first describe what it is, and I use the what are they in hopes of propagating it, and it's already gotten some traction elsewhere. The way it got started was I was about to go into semi-retirement, and knowing that I love learning and I love collaborating with other people, that's what I would miss at work. I thought I love to take online courses. As I mentioned in my sort of bio, I'm an omnivore of knowledge and everything else. And I thought, well, I can take some courses, but that's lonely. So I live in Lexington, which is kind of there's a lot of technical kind of people in town, white collar kind of town, you might say. And it had a mailing list. And so I posted a message to this mailing list. Say, hey, anyone interested in taking a course together? Let's just decide what it will be. And we can get together at the library or somewhere once a week. And I got good response. And so fast forward through all of the minutia of getting that all done. That's the nuts and bolts that I could talk about at length. We took our first course. It was a success. And I reached out again to a larger audience, including a Facebook audience. We had sort of a second round and got into more courses that were very discussion-oriented courses. And so you can see on the site, onlinecoursecollective.org, I've sort of a curated set of courses that we've taken that are really good for discussion. So each course lasts, we take a course on like Coursera or MITx, or at your local library might be available Canopy's for free. All these are free, by the way. Canopy's great courses. So many different media. So we choose one of these courses collectively, kind of come to a consensus about it, and then we dive in and we meet once a week in person. So that's the gist of what it is. And the characteristic of our particular group is that, we're all kind of omnivores, like I said. We're open to all kinds of courses, and the diversity of courses we've taken is really good. Also, the diversity of people in our group is really rich, and I think that makes for a good discussion group, a good ongoing, sharing interests, and it's good to have different viewpoints in any kind of creative effort. And it's interesting that the site, onlinecoursecollective.org, is focused right now on all these nuts and bolts, like how to find a meeting room and what's your next step. And I was reflecting, I really need to add a lot more to the site that talks about how a group evolves and how the leadership, in my role in this case, evolves as you first establish kind of, okay, what are the ground rules in working relationship, and just sort of casually institute this sort of social aspect to it. And then as the group evolves to be kind of people trust each other and know how to interact and so on with all this diversity, my role evolved to be more of a moderator. So not so much guiding through the entire course of the week, but just fostering the conversations and keeping it on track. So it's interesting to think about that over time.
Cool. Well, maybe we need to have a Peeragogy pattern, write it up as a pattern, a nice succinct summary of, the evolving role perhaps is important. But yeah, going from spearheading something because you wanted to keep learning to, wow, suddenly you're managing a organization of a lot of other people with similar interests. Sounds like an exciting trajectory. Karl, do you have anything you'd like to jump in to add to that discussion? Sure. Do you do online course collectives, or is this
they are a bit more structured than Steve's experience. We've been in business, as I said, for about 30 years, and started off with a group of retired social workers who wanted to continue learning. And now we have, on a scale of 300 members, it's a paid membership organization. and we have a couple of paid staffers who assist with registration and coordination of schedules and so on, as well as volunteers who select courses and instructors and evaluate those instructors. And our classes are 5-week, 90-minute sessions. They are typically lecture discussion with some smaller groups may be more conversational. We have one 95-year-old philosophy professor who teaches with the Socratic method. And so he's got some very precise ways of eliciting group engagement. We also have people who are teaching, classes with more than 100 people, and there were questions and comments that jam the meeting. So in between that, I have my courses. I just finished teaching a course on wrongology, the study of being wrong, and we'll be teaching a course in the fall on the Luddites, the history of the Luddites in the early 19th century, and coming up to the modern day colloquial version of Luddites. We're not smashing machines, but we're actively resisting the power of mechanization over our lives. And so the courses, as I say, are a bit more formal than what Steve has talked about. We do online courses. We were forced into that by COVID, and we're finding that lots of people, particularly who live outside of the Worcester area, I should have mentioned earlier, we're based at Assumption University in Worcester, and we have lots of people in the Worcester area, but also like now I'm at our summer place, which is a good distance from Worcester, and yet I'm able to participate, teach, as well as take courses.
Cool. Yeah, I saw the slide that said 30 years ago, 30 years of peer learning. That's certainly a good track record, more so than we've had in the Peeragogy project, although some of our members have been peer learning in different ways. But to announce 30 years of peer learning is quite exciting, and see that written down. I typed that into Google, and 30 years ago was Tuesday, May 11th, 1993. The internet was about to get pretty big right back then, but it sounds like you moved online. Fully online.
I should add, I was working at Digital at the time, and we got access to the it was a Mosaic browser, I think it was, and it was probably one of the very few times when I've made a prediction that came true. The first time that I saw it, and it was very small scale, I said, "This is going to be big. This is going to be really big," and I got it right.
Cool. I see you also on the slide, it talks about an interest group in AI in the Supreme Court.
Right.
That's a very up-to-date topic. Could you tell a little bit about that?
Sure. We've been doing a Supreme Court discussion group. We have a retired attorney who leads those discussions, and we look at cases before the court, throughout the court's term. So it starts in October and finishes at the end of June. The AI discussion special interest group is going to be starting this fall. We've got a spotlight lecture or discussion coming up in a couple of weeks, where we will be able to talk about things. So one of the aspects of it, there are three of us will be speaking. One will be speaking on the ethics of AI. Another will be speaking on some concerns, and he calls it, the devil is in the details. And when I heard his title, I said, well, I've got to go back to Mies van der Rohe, who said, God is in the details. And so we're going to be focusing on three aspects of AI as a kickoff to the special interest group that will be continuing into the next year, with a particular focus on how AI is going to be affecting seniors, AI in healthcare, AI in socialization, AI in education, and how they regard it in preparation for their conversations with their grandchildren, so that they're not so afraid and not so bewildered when the grandkids are talking about using ChatGPT to summarize a paper that they've just written.
It sounds exciting. I'm curious to know, to both of you, if I could get involved in some of these conversations and how I could get involved. or how anyone could get involved if they were, living overseas or living in a different part of the country. But maybe we can fold that into a discussion of our next point, Charlotte. If you could move us ahead to that slide. Topic 3 is challenges for maintaining groups, whether the groups are free or paid. The need for scheduled and ad hoc discussions outside of formal meeting. We also have a question coming in: best practices for maintaining interest, and do people drop out? So over 30 years, I could imagine people have come and gone from WISE. You have some instructors, the senior instructors instructing seniors. Sounds cool, but do you work with others who are in younger generations? That's one first question I want to ask.
So we don't check IDs. People of any age can join, and there are people who, on occasion, who are perhaps parents who are stay at home and they want to do something during the day while the kids are in school. They can join. We've had just a few of those. Other similar organizations have been more proactive in that space and have been able to engage younger people. I have had students from Assumption University come to my classes to present their projects. So I worked with a history professor a couple of times where the topic that I was teaching related to research that these students were doing in the course of their studies. And so they would come and present their material on advertising in colonial America, or studies of advertisements in newspapers in the colonial era. So we've had some opportunities for cross-generational discussions, as well as, of course, education among seniors. And invariably there's an attrition rate because of our population. People do get old, and they be older, and they become unable to participate. But nobody gets to play the "I'm too old" card with me. I've had people in their 90s attend classes, ask good questions about the technology, as well as about how to do other stuff. So there's no upper age limit, and we try as often as possible to bring in younger people.
So this brings to, because you do a lot of content production, whereas it sounds like your organization anyway does a lot of content production and bringing in guest speakers or people who can present things. Whereas Steve, it sounds to me as though primarily your organization has grown up around the fact, which is an interesting fact, that there's so many other people out there doing great content production. Why don't we spend some time learning about it, and we'll produce maybe some para content, which is the discussions, and we might. So tell a little bit, but then you are also talking, Steve, that you yourself felt motivated to create sort of an instruction manual how others can do this. And I know at least one person in the Peeragogy project who was inspired by your work, Fabio, this is, and he said, I'm going to go try it. So he went off and tried it. So you've got this great kind of experimental process that pretty much anyone anywhere in the world, Fabio's in Brazil, can replicate. And report also on what works for them. So it sounds like you are creating some content. Is that goal coming into focus now?
I'd say I could start by sort of contrasting with the WISE model, and also getting back to your question, what would it take if you wanted to participate? And I'll say that one thing about what we have in the Lexington group, and given that it has a name, Lexington, is that it's really important. It certainly was a key factor when we started to meet in person, because the kinds of discussions, I mean, we're all used to Zoom meetings and other online meetings like this, and of course, reminiscing mostly about great gatherings in person. And so given that the in-person component is really important, even though we're online mostly now, we still get together for beers or something now and then, especially when it's time to choose the next course, when you really want a feel of the room and, a good sense of people's, even just the minute facial expressions, are you on board with this, that kind of thing. So that part of it is important. Now, to get to your question that you just asked about creating content, that's, I would call that sort of meta content. Like, it's like this model has worked for us. This pattern, you might say. I really like the pattern language kind of language. Since it's worked for us, I'd like to see if we could replicate this model. I don't have any personal interest in it, but it's worked so well and it's so much fun for us. I want to empower others to do this. And it was really fantastic that having gotten involved in the Peeragogy meetings, that Fabio took it up. And it's an interesting segue a little bit to think about the different kinds of this model. There are flavors of it. So the current one we have in Lexington is group of omnivores. They're there for the long run, looking forward to the next course as soon as the one course is finished. There's another perfectly valid model and useful model for which this works, which is a group of professionals, which is what Fabio did. He and a group of teachers took a course called, I believe it was called The Bilingual Mind. And they're language teachers. And so they found this course online and met, I believe it was once a week, to discuss what they agreed to cover for that week. And it's just a good way of motivating yourselves collectively to do the work. So the more technical or, and in fact, that's how we started. Just to go back a bit, I started the Lexington Online Collective, and I put up all of these possible courses from history to art to machine learning. And this group of people that came together who had never met at the library chose to do the hardest and the longest course, which was a course on machine learning that went probably 3 months. And by the time we were finished, we went from 7 people down to 3 people, because just normal attrition, it's hard work. And so the courses, as I mentioned, we do now are more geared towards social interaction, where I imagine that Fabio's was really about doing the work, right? I'll mention one other variant of this model, which I called Peeragogy, because along the course of doing these courses, there was one course, like a heavy-duty statistics course I wanted to take, and I knew it was not going to be good for our group. And so I just posted to the group, anybody want to take this with me? We're just going to be doing the homework. And one person responded, that's exactly what I wanted to take. And so she and I met at the library, and we came up with this model where we agreed that each week, one of us would act as the professor. We've both studied the work, but one of us had to sort of teach the course. And of course, we all know that having to teach something is the best way to learn it very thoroughly. So that was another variant of this collective model that worked really well, just one-on-one.
That's very cool.
If I could just toss it. So one of the things that I've just started, I'll say, playing with, Khan Academy, of course, has courses primarily geared to high school and younger ages. Sal Khan has just released a tutor, an AI-enabled tutor that is integrated into Khan Academy to help students understand, how, where they went wrong in a particular module. I just got access to it, and so I'm picking up on a statistics course that I started a couple of years ago and didn't finish, but it was very helpful in, very specifically showing me, without giving me the answer, showing me where my answer was wrong, and working as a one-on-one tutor. And this is his model of being able to have a scalable system so that you get one-on-one tutors for millions of students. And I think this, so just as a segue on statistics, I mean, this is just basic statistics, nothing at the scale that what Steve was talking about.
That's pretty exciting. I mean, it's very current because I see Khan Academy posted this news May 1. So consider yourself to be part of the cutting edge. I had never heard of that, although I'd been following.
What's interesting along those lines is that Andrew Ng, who's a star in the world of machine learning, actually founded Coursera, with this platform through which we take a lot of these courses. And I saw a talk by him in which he explained that they are, even in the early days, very carefully tracked students' progress and when they dropped off, and they would adjust, do A/B tests and kind of things on the quizzes to try to keep people engaged. Didn't want to make the quiz too hard, but not too easy. And so that's been a aspect of these, at least the two that we've talked about, of these platforms, is to try to ensure that people succeed to get through a course.
So I'd like to do a number of things simultaneously. One is, Charlotte, if we could move on to topic 4 and have that up on the screen. The next one is, if you're willing to jump into the discussion, Charlotte, I wanted to bring you into the discussion about topic-oriented discussions, because you're also running, and have been for a while helping run IPNI, the New England Independent Publishers Organization. So that's an interest group about book discussions, about publishing books rather than reading books. But here's a number of topics around special interest groups, book discussion, writing groups, special events, travel. So I wondered if you had any comments or questions for Karl and Steve based on your experiences with IPNI or other organizations.
Yeah, I've been on the board and involved in IPNE, Independent Publishers of New England, since 2008, I think. But it's been, pretty rough. There hasn't been a lot of progress in sort of gelling a, truly engaged, dynamic community of people. But there's been some success. And I think one of the things that we've done in recent years, so we have 6 states, right? New England states, with varying numbers of members in each one, but we decided to start regional groups, and those have been kind of sputtering along since, for the last 10 years, maybe. But Zoom has, or, online connections have really enhanced that. And I think the major thing is to do it regularly. So, I finally got, a regular schedule for the Connecticut, and we started a Connecticut group. The Vermont group is really thriving, and the Metro Boston group. But we have other states that, other regions that we could develop. But I think those two things, I don't know, people just, for this wide area, it's hard to kind of form a common bond, or, and so we're starting with the regional things.
Trying to maintain attention. Before the show, we were talking about my definition of luxury is being able to do one thing at a time, and we have so many things pulling at us, and trying to ensure that members of these learning groups can, to use Steve's phrase, can succeed. Part of it is to keep them engaged, and by that I also mean keep me engaged, because I've got the squirrel kind of response to so many different cool things, and it disrupts my ability to participate in any one thing really well.
Right.
Yeah, I would
and kind of keep an eye out for, for what is, what people's little thing is, and then try and address that once in a while,
Yeah,
I don't know if that makes sense.
You might find an idea that works really well in one context for a while, but doesn't work very well in another context, or indeed does work in another context again for a while. So how do you keep things lively and moving? We're going to have to keep this one moving. Charlotte, if you could move to our closing slides, just talk a little bit about how we like to close out these conversations. So that there's a comment on all the people who've contributed to making this possible. Thank you, everybody, for participating in the podcast and in the Peeragogy project as well. And on the very next slide, there's some questions. What did we expect to learn or make together? What happened? What are some different perspectives on what happened? What did we learn, and what should we change going forward? And I very much hope our guests will be able to stick around. We've got one more slide. The after discussion will take place on meet.jit.c/Peeragogy. And there's other ways for you to get involved with the Peeragogy project at peeragogy.org. So have a look at that if you're interested. There's loads of ways to find us online. But the discussion, and I can think of a few interesting next steps I'd like to discuss with guests, will be taking place on that link in a few minutes. So for those who can stick around, I'll see you there. Thanks so much to Karl and Steve. Thank you, Charlotte, for making this happen. And
Thank
call
you.
it around.
This was
Thank you very much.
All right. See you in Jitsi.